Now the media is willing to accept that indeed Hunter Biden was running an influence peddling operation, but they insist that he was just selling the illusion of influence and access. Well, how do we know that? Do you just assume that? These emails could go a long way to determining what was a deliverable and whether it went beyond an illusion.
Well, I think the American people, everybody deserves to know this. That was Jonathan Turley talking about some of the latest developments and this ongoing. I mean, this is getting so. I made the joke earlier. My grandmother used to watch soap operas in the afternoon, and this is even more convoluted and more dramatic than anything that she ever watched in the afternoon, because that's how busy this family was selling influence and enriching themselves off of it. And every day we're finding out more, because House Oversight's doing such a great job at uncovering everything that they've been trying to hide. Joining us now, Representative James Comer, chairman of House Oversight, who's been doing a lot of work, a lot of digging. Congressman, good to have you. Thank you so much. One of the things that I was thinking about when we were looking at some of the latest developments, like for instance, the archives and all of these pseudonyms that Joe Biden had been using, thousands of them. I'm curious. I mean, why have they not been forthcoming in giving you this information? It's not classified.
No, and I'm furious that it's taken us this long to figure out that they had pseudonyms. I can't help but think, since there were 5,400 emails in pseudonyms, that the National Archives has known all along about this. And we requested information months ago when we began the investigation from the National Archives about all correspondence between Joe Biden and pertaining to Ukraine and anything Hunter Biden was tagged on, and we got nothing, virtually nothing back. And I thought, that's odd. You know, they were obviously probably trying to hide something, and they weren't communicating by email. They were probably doing it by WhatsApp. That's kind of what these government employees are doing now. But then we could figure out that they were using pseudonyms. We re-request the information in the names of the pseudonyms, and lo and behold, there's 5,400 emails. But because they happened in the Obama administration, and because many of them have been redacted, Barack Obama has to give us approval, according to the National Archives, to get those. So we are now waiting, and he has 30 days, President Obama has 30 days to decide whether or not he's going to give us those unredacted emails in the pseudonyms.
So just to recap what Representative Comer just said, they're waiting for former President Obama to sign off to allow the National Archives and Records Administration to give you this information about Joe Biden and all the different names that he used to talk about the weather, presumably.
Right. You know, and the one email that we do have in the pseudonym that had Hunter Biden copied on it, that's explosive. I know that a lot of the media got out, you know, they were all covering the pseudonyms, the fact that Joe Biden was using pseudonyms. But to me, the biggest story there was that Hunter Biden was in fact copied on a government email pertaining to Ukraine at the same time that Devin Archer testified that he was being squeezed by Burisma owners to call Washington for help. The same Burisma owner who there was an FBI Form 1023 that allegedly bribed Joe Biden and Hunter Biden for terminating the prosecutor. All of this is connected. The timelines are connected. We have the testimony from Devin Archer. And, you know, what Jonathan Turley said in your opening, there are policy decisions that Joe Biden made that we believe were made because he was paid, because his family was paid. And this is at the top of the list. Firing the prosecutor who was investigating his son for corruption. And that's a pretty explosive charge there, but all the evidence is there that would suggest it. And I think there are more emails that they use pseudonyms where Hunter was copied, but they've redacted Hunter's name on them.
And her talking with Congressman James Comer, who's, I mean, that's a new one. Some of the stuff that you're telling me now is new information I didn't have. Do you anticipate the former president, Barack Obama, signing off on this? I mean, how do you think he will?
Well, the last time we had to get his sign off on something, he took the full 30 days, but it's my understanding that he did allow us to have that. So, of course, that information really didn't amount to anything. Mm-hmm. We believe this information will. So we'll see if he is as agreeable this time as he was the last time. So what they're doing is they're reviewing these emails. And, you know, my question, if if in fact we do get these emails and there were redactions of Hunter Biden's name being copied on them, who redacted that and why? Why would you redact who's copied on the emails? These aren't classified emails. You know, the questions are so many here. Why was Joe Biden using a pseudonym to talk about foreign policy? Because, you know, there are politicians who have used pseudonyms before, but they used it for personal reasons. Okay, this email is pertaining to my personal schedule. My son has a baseball game. I've got an email account that my wife's going to be copied on about the schedule or whatever. That wasn't the case here. These were pseudonyms used for major policy decisions, and copying Hunter Biden, who's his adult son, who just so happens to be the subject of the investigation by the prosecutor that Joe Biden's wanting to get fired. I mean, this is going to get harder and harder for Jamie Raskins and Goldman to walk out to MSNBC and continue their lies and their cover-ups on. I mean, this is obvious what happened here with the corruption led by Joe Biden.
And it also brings up another question, Congressman, and I know this is something that you've all been exploring as well. I mean, because this began when Joe Biden was vice president, it's hard to imagine that this was going on right under Barack Obama's nose and him not being in on it, frankly.
Well, I don't know if Barack Obama was in on it or not, but I believe Barack Obama knew about it, which is just as bad. Because you remember, at this point in the administration, Barack Obama's term limited out, but he's young, he's charismatic, he knows he's going to make a bunch of money in the private sector. Because at this point is when the politicians try to figure out what they're going to do to make money in the private sector. Barack Obama knew he could make money in speeches, and he would write books and people would buy it. Joe Biden knew nobody's going to buy his darn book. Nobody gives a crap about Joe Biden, right? No board was going to hire him. He wasn't going to be like Dick Cheney and be hired to be CEO of a big publicly traded company. The only thing Joe Biden could think of he could do to profit was off his vice presidency, was off his last name. And he was using Hunter as a front man. And Hunter was in trouble in Ukraine because of the shady deal he was involved in with a company named Burisma. Burisma was under investigation by this brand new prosecutor, Shokin, who there was never any evidence was corrupt. So Joe Biden created a narrative, much like they created the narrative with the Steele dossier. And, you know, the Democrats tell the media what to report. Oh, the Steele dossier shows Trump colluded with Russia. They did the same thing here with Shokin in Ukraine. They say, oh, this prosecutor's corrupt. But what we found 2 weeks ago was an email from Obama's State Department to Shokin thanking him for the good work he's doing in his reform efforts in Ukraine. So there was never any evidence that would suggest that Shokin was corrupt. The only mistake Shokin made was he was investigating Joe Biden's son for corruption.
We're talking with, this is unbelievable, talking with Congressman James Comer on all of this. One of the other, I mean, going into some of the Department of Justice, I know everyone's been rightly critical of David Weiss, the guy who structured this sweetheart deal for Hunter Biden. I get the game they're playing. They're going to try to wait out statute of limitations. I get it. But at this point, I mean, I think it's not begging the question to say that there was some collusion with the DOJ and that Merrick Garland's all in on it and is aware of this. I mean, it just, at this point, it's what can be done to sort of, you can't really trust Garland on this. This is not a fair pursuit of truth. How do you remedy this?
Well, I think our actions have already created results because the judge in Delaware kicked out that sweetheart plea deal based on the letters that Congress sent her. The letters detailed all the crimes that Hunter Biden committed. I mean, he's committed violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. He's committed money laundering. He's committed tax evasion. He's committed wire fraud. I mean, I would suggest he's committed racketeering. The list goes on and on and on. And the judge started reading those. And that's when the sweetheart deal fell apart. Were it not for congressional investigation, were it not for the Republican majority, Hunter Biden would have been granted immunity forever. And no one would ever be held accountable. That's an important
point.
It is. And you know, that's something that McCarthy talks about. I know everybody's frustrated with Republican majority in the House because the Democrats still control the Senate and we've got a Democrat White House. But the one thing that we've been able to deliver on is the subpoena power that my committee has. And we've been able to prove that Joe Biden was corrupt. that his family was corrupt, that the Department of Justice was weaponized. They did treat the Bidens differently than they are currently treating Trump, and the judge picked up on it and kicked it out. So I think that now we can keep an eye on anything pertaining to a court of law, and we will submit to the judge the evidence. And even though the mainstream media won't accept the fact that there's overwhelming evidence against the Bidens, the judges will. So I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to hold these people accountable. It would be a lot easier if we had a Republican president and a capable, credible Republican attorney general, but unfortunately we don't.
Exactly. Last question for you, Congressman James Comer. You know, that's one of the things, because y'all are getting ready to go back, and I know that a budget battle is going to be one of the first things that y'all are going to be involved in. That's something that's come up because, you know, obviously Democrat Senate, there's only so much the House can do because you have to have the Senate, you know, to prosecute some of this stuff. And then, of course, you know, the AG, if you don't have a Republican president, you're going to have somebody like Merrick Garland. So what does that do to the strategy of withholding funding? And I know it's kind of a touchy one for some members in purple districts because we're going into an election year.
Yeah. I don't really understand why it's so difficult for some of those members. I'm sympathetic to members in purple districts, and I know their constituents talk to them about completely different issues than my constituents in a very ruby red district talk about. However, I think we've made the case that there are people in our government that have contributed to this cover-up of Biden corruption, and they need to be held accountable. We've got a Department of Justice that lied about collusion with Russia. They've tried to give the Biden family a deal that no one in the history of America ever would have gotten: complete blanket immunity for the rest of their lives. That's what the deal was for Hunter Biden. And the FBI's lied to us. They have lied time after time after time. And then we have a border that's not secure. No one in America can argue that we have a secure border and a competent Homeland Security director. So, you know, I believe that there are areas that surely to goodness we can agree on to cut. And I hope that as we speak, our leadership is sitting down working with the various factions, because we have moderates that want to increase spending, and we have people like me that want to significantly decrease spending. But we have to realize I'm not going to get everything I want. The moderates aren't going to get everything they want. But surely to goodness, one thing that we can agree on and sell in the Senate is that there are people in the Department of Justice and at the FBI and at the IRS who need to be held accountable, and we can hold them accountable surely without cutting Social Security and cutting Medicare and cutting essential services that every American expects the government to provide.
Oh, well, it's going to be interesting watching y'all go back in the House. We're going to be watching that fight and seeing how the Senate responds as well. James Comer, appreciate what you're doing as part of House Oversight, leading the committee. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.